truth is such a weird word. I
Well, I,
mean,
I don't know
especially in
anybody
the,
watches reality TV looking for that, right?
well, guess what? I don't know anybody that watches court TV looking for that either,
You
because
think?
I'm sorry, but you watch these trials, it's
Hmm.
a battle of stories. Each side
Mm,
has the story that they're trying to convince the jury is the truest version of the facts that are
hmm.
at their disposal. I believe that in sentencing, the prosecutor has a fiction concocted in every case, in my humble, biased opinion, which is this person's horrible.
Hmm.
This person is nothing more than the offense that they have committed. That's their truth.
Hmm.
And that's never the truth. Over 1 million Americans face sentencing every year, and it will be the most important day of their lives. But we don't fully understand the system, how broken it is, and what we can do to make it better. I'm Doug Passon. I'm a 25-year criminal defense lawyer and a sentencing expert. My goal is to bring more awareness, more fairness, and more humanity to the sentencing process. So, are you ready? Then let's get set for sentencing. Hey everybody, Doug Passon coming to you from Studio 3553 in Scottsdale, Arizona, helping us get set for sentencing. I'm so excited about this because, we do a lot of topics on set for sentencing because, everything can be related to sentencing, but this is where I live and breathe. This is my heart and soul. It's about narrative, it's storytelling, and more specifically, the sentencing mitigation video. So anytime I can get a story professional on my podcast, I'm sort of giddy, and I have one today by the name of Debbie Levin. So Debbie comes to us. Well, I don't know. You're on vacation right now, so I don't know where you're actually are in this very moment. Where are you?
Maryland.
You're in Maryland, but she
Yes.
kind of comes to us, well, Maryland by way of LA. So
Hmm.
Debbie is an 18-year veteran of what we call unscripted television,
Hmm.
which the layperson knows, I think, better as reality TV. And I think that's the word of the day. This reality. This is going to be the very center and the very focus of our conversation, because a lot of people would say reality TV isn't that real. But then again, a lot of people would say that what I do in making documentaries for clients and for use in court, sentencing, and post conviction relief is somehow not real either. And so we're going to really, really dig into this idea about reality and truth. And I think it's going to be a very cool discussion. But before we get going, I want people to know a little bit more about you because you have a really long, amazing, incredible history of working on shows that every single one of us have know about at the very least, but more likely watched or binge watched in our lives. She's way more than reality TV. I don't want to put her in that box. She's done really interesting things for National Geographic and comedy specials for Amazon, you name it. But some of the maybe more well-known credits would be Top Chef, Real Housewives of New Jersey, and apparently the OC, right?
Hmm.
And I'm not a huge reality TV guy these days, but I do confess I used to watch religiously the Real Housewives of OC in the early
Oh,
years.
you
I
did?
I did. I don't know what drew me into that, but I was really, really hooked on that show for a couple of years. But and you've done Food Network stuff. Guy
Hmm.
Fieri is on there. One of your
Hmm.
things you heard, Bobby Flay. Like I said,
Hmm.
Top Chef, Top Design, Millionaire Matchmaker. This is a very long list. I won't go through it all, but it's amazing. So your depth and breadth of experience is going to help us get set for sentencing today. I will say, normally when I do this after hours, well, not normally, but sometimes I have a bottle of tequila by my side. I don't know if you've seen those, and I always have pseudo sponsors of the podcast thematically related to it. Now, because my father listens religiously to these podcasts, and it's 4:43 on a Thursday, I won't be drinking tequila, mostly so he doesn't worry that I'm a raging alcoholic. But if I were drinking tequila today, the bottle I would have by my side is Santofino, which is Guy Fieri and Sammy Hagar's brand of tequila.
Is it?
Yes, it
I
is.
did not know that. You should have sent me one. I could.
I could still do
It's
that.
almost 8 p.m. here. I could be sipping on it.
You should be sipping. But here's the thing, since we're talking about celebrities, and
Mm-hmm.
I always like a little tequila trivia. I
Mm-hmm.
normally my default rule is do not drink celebrity tequilas, period. Because every one of them's got them and they're all garbage. But guess
Right.
what? I have two exceptions.
Mm-hmm.
And one is Codigo, which was George Strait's, pretty darn good, very
Mm-hmm.
respectable. And the other is Santofino. It is
Hmm.
amazing, amazing tequila. And they
Wow.
just came out with a still strength, a high proof that I actually was sipping last night. Kid you not. And it's divine. So anyway,
I
um,
love tequila. I actually shot with Guy in Mexico for a Food Network show. And because I don't know if they had a tequila line back then, this was years ago,
yeah.
but we got to shoot at Sammy Hagar's house.
Oh, cool.
He wasn't there. His
Yeah.
lots of security was there, but we got to shoot his house on the beach in Mexico. It was
So
really
maybe
cool.
they've been buds for a while then, these two.
Yeah, I mean this was back. Uh, yeah, this was a long time ago,
Well, I don't want to get
15 years ago.
digress too deep down the rabbit hole of tequila, but I will say Sammy Hagar is the original celebrity tequila guy. He started this brand Cabo Wabo, and it was way back, and it was very
Right.
high quality, wonderful. It was one of the first great celebrity tequila, well, tequilas, but he sold that. He sold that. And he tells a story of someone, big company came to him and said, we want to buy your tequila. We want to give you
Mm-hmm.
$10 million for your, and he goes, I don't think so. He goes, I really like making tequila. And by the way, I don't think $10 million is going to change my life all that significantly. I mean, after all, I'm fucking Sammy Hagar, right? And the guy says to him, what do you think would, change your life? And he goes, I don't know, maybe 100 million. And the guy said, done. And
Wow.
so he sold Cabo Wabo for like that. And then he partnered with Guy Fieri to do this Santofino. It's really good stuff.
Amazing.
Anyway, well, I'm gonna bring it back on topic here. Now I'm really
I
thirsty.
think there is so am I. I think there is a correlation. I mean, if you watch reality television, and I don't know about the early days of OC, but there's a lot of reality stars that have alcohol brands, be it
Yes.
wine or tequila or things like that. And that's been a big topic of conversation for a long time. I don't know if you know who Bethany Frankel is.
Sure. Skinny girl.
Skinny Girl
That's
Margaritas.
that's her
Yeah.
line. Yeah, skinny girl.
Yeah. She really changed things for our industry when it came to housewives or anyone in reality TV having something they were selling, right? Like
Yeah.
something they were hawking. Again, most of them it's alcohol, especially for the housewives.
All right.
So, Bethany Frankel, when she started on Real Housewives of New York, her
Yeah.
storyline was that, she was broke for the most part, right? And it covered her journey of trying to get this brand, popular. And eventually, several seasons in, it got very popular, and a lot of that, if not all of it, was because of the show. It's an
Interesting.
incredible platform for these men and women to advertise their products, whatever they may be. And so because of that changed the industry, in that now the networks take a percentage of all the reality stars brands, and not just the networks,
Really?
also the production companies.
Oh, I
Yes.
did not know that.
It's the
That's an
Bethany
interesting.
Frankel phenomenon, or Bethany Frankel clause. There's a name that attorneys use.
Wow.
Yeah, because, why shouldn't they get a piece of that if it's part of the story that we're showing, right?
Yes.
So
Well,
anyways.
that is fascinating. And I don't think that's too far off topic of what we're saying, because first of all, the idea of what is true, what is real.
Mm,
And I'm not going to comment on Skinny Girl. I don't know it. I have never had it. I'm sure it's great, but I can comment on what I do know, which is tequila. And the
mhm.
reason why I don't recommend celebrity tequilas is because there's a name for those tequilas in the tequila world. They call them tequila
Hi.
because it's not real. It's manipulated, it's artificial, there's additives, there's chemicals in, and the
Mm,
process is not authentic. And it's because they have the brand name, the big name, they can sell products. Because if
exactly.
Mark Wahlberg says it's great, or if one of the Kardashians says drink 818,
That's right.
it's going to be great. Or if The Rock has his, and you go Kevin Hart and LeBron James, go down the list. They all have
Yep.
tequilas, and very, very few of them are worth the bottle that they live in. So, and I'll tell you what, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, this is back to reality TV. This is the idea of who are these people? Are we really meeting the real person? Or is this a character that they're playing in reality? And I don't
Mm-hmm.
think there's any better example of the reality TV show that changed the entire course of history. And you know what I'm talking about. It's The Apprentice.
Kardak.
It's The
uh,
Apprentice.
how so? How did it change?
The case can be made
Uh-huh.
that Donald Trump's popularity
Mm.
as a
Oh,
great businessman and a super cool personality and a really great leader and sitting in his boardroom on his chair and the "you're fired" and all that bullshit was what really brought him to the world. Now, he was a still celebrity in his own right before, but that's what brought him. That's not only what put him on everyone's radar, but it's what created the persona that
hmm.
convinced the masses that he is somehow qualified to be the leader of the free world. And I submit to you, Debbie Levin, that if there
Hmm.
were no apprentice,
Oh,
there'd be no Donald Trump.
gosh.
That's
Let's rewind that tape,
Yeah.
please.
I mean, that's just my theory. I mean, that's not
I
my
think you're
theory. A lot
right.
of people would say that. People
I
are
think you're
saying,
right.
a lot of people
People,
would say. But
I
this is what
agree.
I'm talking about. So this is called reality TV. So
Mm,
ostensibly, you're watching these programs and you're thinking, what I'm seeing here is actually the truth. It's happening. That's what these people are like. And this is what their life is. And this is what their story is. So how, disabuse me of the notion that this is
mm,
not true or that it is true. Is it? What's your take on that?
yeah, it's layered. I mean, I can only speak about the shows that I worked on. I consume a lot of reality content too. I just do. I watch it very differently. I watch it as if I'm in the edit bay. And I'd like to think at this point I can see what's real and what's not real. It's tough. You talk about The Apprentice. I did not work on that one, but you're right. They painted him as this very successful, wealthy, businessman. And now we're learning that that wasn't necessarily entirely true. And I think you could look at the housewives and say that too, to a certain
Yeah.
extent, right? I mean, we're not necessarily painting them that way. They may be painting themselves that way. But, for the most part, the shows that I've worked on, I feel very confident saying it's real. Like who these people are real. And for the most part, the story that we told was real too. It's a complex
Yes.
situation. I think it would have to be talked about almost by show,
Yes.
because not
Yeah.
every
It's different.
show. Yes, I mean, I will say, people say all the time it's fake, and I disagree. And I've been in the trenches. I've created shows, I've produced them, I've directed them, I've sat in the edit bay for all of them, and there's a lot of real stuff going on. It's really, what do you consider fake? What maybe we break it down to like
Okay,
specific.
that's a good question. And I should preface this by letting people know you really do have an inside scoop on my world, because the reason we came together is, I guess you found me on the podcast or through the interwebs and figured
Mhm.
out that I was doing documentary work for in my job as a lawyer, and you were intrigued by that.
Mhm.
I've sort of like peeled back the curtain on what I do. So I want you to bring that into this
Mhm.
discussion because it's really a compare and contrast. And
Right.
the reason I want to, full transparency is because I've gotten, I wouldn't say in trouble, but the skeptics, and there are skeptics. Uh, I will say this is a widely accepted thing, and it's becoming more and more prolific and popular as we go forward. But there are skeptics. There are skeptics in my world, lawyers who say, I don't think a judge would go for that, or I think that's too over the top, or whatever.
Mm.
There's an occasional judge who says, like, oh, well, you've edited this, so therefore it can't be reliable. It can't be authentic, as if every pleading, every sentencing memo, every police report, every indictment, every piece of paper that ever crossed their desk has been edited.
Right.
I don't know anybody who just like writes some shit and submits the first draft.
Right.
Things are moved here, punch up the emotion, punch up the story, word choice, this, that, and the other. So I don't understand that, but I think maybe the first thing about reality that I'll throw back to you is I think what people think about when they think about editing is creating, taking a statement out of context, or creating fiction out of, like, we call it, in your business, you have a word for that. It's called what? Frankenbites, right? What's a Frankenbite?
Frankenbites.
Yeah, what's a Frankenbite?
So a Frankenbite is when, look, no one speaks in sound bites, quick, concise bites. When we're interviewing people for these shows, I mean, we like a Housewives, for example, we will sit down with each housewife over the course of months of filming, 100 hours. I mean, it's crazy how much time we spend, because the talking head, the interviews, that's really our connective tissue, and kind of the thing that holds our hand through the narrative. So, we, at least when I do the interviews, and that's my favorite part, honestly, of reality TV or being a producer, it's a real conversation. It's a real, you are trying to get to that emotion. You're trying to peel back the layers, whether it was a fight or a wedding, whatever the case may be. So you've got these really long, drawn out answers. And so what we need to do is we need to shrink them down. We only have 44 minutes for a 1-hour episode, because, you have commercials.
Yeah.
So what we do is we do what's called Frankenbiting. We take pieces of that long answer, we take pieces out that make a complete sentence, and we put it together. Now, we're not necessarily, and this is where kind of the manipulation comes in. Not a lot of people that don't work in the industry know about this. I don't need, if let's say I'm interviewing you about a wedding you were at, and you thought the chicken was overcooked, right? And so in the interview, you're talking about it. Now, maybe when all is said and done, and at the end of the day, I'm trying to make a entertaining show that millions of people watch. And, maybe what you said specifically about the dry chicken in our interview isn't that exciting. So what I can do is, my dog. What I can do is essentially have you say anything I want you to say. As long as you said the words at one point in those 100 hours of interviews that I have with you.
Yeah. That was the greatest chicken I've ever had in my entire life.
I could have you could have been upset about someone 2 months ago, and I can use that to make it look like you are pissed off that chicken was dry, even though you weren't pissed off that chicken was dry. It was just, not good chicken. Right. But I pulled words and emotion from a previous interview about something that had nothing to do with it. As long as the inflection is correct, right? As long as it doesn't sound like I'm going, and So we're searching for words. We're searching for inflections and connective tissues. And so, for example, I probably shouldn't be talking about this, but on a very big show that I worked on, we did Frankenbites constantly.
Yeah.
And every show does it, by the way. But it was such a huge part of the narrative of this show that we hired assistant editors to literally just go in to every single interview and pull out words.
Yeah.
And so, for example, if I'm struggling to find and or but, those kind of connective
Yeah.
tissue, I can reach out to them and say, okay, I need an and, but I need her to be saying and or
Yeah.
and. Again, it's that, it's
Yeah.
got to fit with how we normally speak as humans, but that's what we do. There are no laws
Yeah.
or rules in
Sure.
reality television.
There's no laws in life about lying.
There's no laws in life. I mean,
I mean,
technically,
unless you're committing fraud.
well, I mean, in terms
wait a
of like,
minute. You
we're
are,
not,
I was going to
we are
say, unless
committing
you
crime.
get paid for it.
Well, here's what I was going to say.
I'm just
Every
kidding.
cast member of
Yes.
every show signs a very thick
Yes.
contract that says we
Yeah.
can do that.
Right.
And that we can do anything. I will say I have, I'm trying to think back all the years. For the most part, I can confidently say 99% of the time we're honest. I think it's the moral compass kind of comes in, right? A little bit where you're like, I'm not gonna make her, a racist when she's not, or I'm not gonna, there's like all this stuff that you just don't do.
Yeah. Well, here's the good.
People stick with that.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt, but I was going to say, here's the good news for judges or lawyers or anybody who's watching about what I do. I can't do that. This is different. That's one of the main big differences. My Frankenbites look like, editing out a really long pause or a few more ums from the sentence because I don't have all the time in the world to tell this story and I don't want to waste the judge's time, or I need it to flow a little bit more. But I can never take this piece from that piece. And I certainly can't take it out of context. And what people don't understand is there are no laws in TV land, but in lawyer land, we have laws. They're called the rules of ethics.
Right.
And it's the same way where I can't submit a sentencing letter to the judge that was generated by Chat GPT, or why I can't just make shit up in my pleadings. I'm an officer of the court. The other big difference is I have raw footage. And if I've done my job right, I can, do it in a way that I have no problem handing over to the other side and say, look, you think there's something wrong with this edit? Here's the interview. Go have at it. Tell me what's wrong. And would you shudder to think about what would happen if you released some raw footage of one of those episodes with the chicken, with the chicken being? You can't really do that.
Release it to who? Viewers or talent?
Yeah, anybody. I don't know. Like, I want to see the raw footage and see if they were really pissed off about that chicken. You don't have to do that.
Does anyone really care?
No, well, no. Then they're happier that they're pissed off because that's what makes it an interesting story.
What's interesting for the shows that I've worked on, the ones where we shoot for an extended period of time, for months on end sometimes, right? Or even a month or two, it becomes a bubble, not only for us in production, but mainly for the cast. They're really living this world in this bubble. And then, the amount of time that it takes to not only shoot, but then post these kind of like, 10, 15, 19 1-hour long episods. By the time it airs, they think they said that. They honestly don't remember, to be honest with you. Funny. I have yet, in all my years, no talent has ever come back to me and said, I never said that.
Interesting. I have, by the way, a clip, because we were talking about Frankenbites, and I cannot resist playing this clip. You probably know the story that I've told 6 million times about how they made a Simpsons episode about sentencing mitigation videos.
Yes.
Okay.
You told me the first time we spoke.
I tell everybody. I'll tell anybody that listens, but you're going to love it. I don't know if you've already seen this episode, but you're going to love this, and I'm going to put it on this episode, and copyright be damned. This is called fair use because we're doing educational content about Frankenbiting. Just as a setup, Homer's making a sentencing video because he's in trouble for stealing comic book guy's car. Lisa figures out there's this thing called sentencing mitigation videos, so the Simpsons set out to make one for Homer's sentencing.
Now you say nice things about me.
So what is it you're looking for? Words or something? Human words? Okay, Homer Simpson. Well, real family man. Yeah, always brings his kids into the bar. Not one of them aristocrats who gets all bent out of shape when there's a mouse in his beer.
Hey, Mo, I need you to file a serial number off a wheelchair.
Cut!
Homer Simpson? How can I put this? We've never had an employee get rehired so many times.
Homer Simpson has 2 children enrolled in our school. That's all I'm comfortable saying.
All right, let's see what you got.
I had to edit a little.
Homer Simpson, family man, happy, aristocrat.
Too cool? Comfortable?
Homer is a grace to the family. He is an 8-ball father. I warned Marge, marry him.
That's the best you can do? I'm screwed!
That's hysterical.
Yes.
Well, I'll tell you, yes, Homer did 2 things wrong. one, the inflections. Did you notice that? It was very
Yes.
robotic. And 2, they didn't cover the cuts. We cover the cuts with B-roll.
Yes.
See?
Yes.
That's how it's done.
And we
Next
do
time
cover
you
the
watch
cuts.
You
Yes,
do.
that's a similarity. We do cover the cuts, but B-roll are those what I call emotionally evocative images, which is to say you need to live the life,
There you go.
the experience of our clients. And the more images you can include in a sentencing video, the better off. And it just so happens that, they serve a second function, which is covering up some awkward little transitions and cuts or jump cuts between 2 witnesses and everything else that can be jarring to look
Mhm.
at. But it's an honest, I mean, I can say it till the cows come home. A lot of people are gonna be like, yeah, well, you're a lawyer. There's no such thing as honest. But it really, in my humble opinion, well, you tell me, because you've seen some of these. You've actually worked on one. Do you feel like it's an honest process?
Oh, 100%. And I honestly, if I remember correctly, I think when I was working on that one with you and kind of going into the edit, my instinct was to Frankenbite because I've been doing that for almost 2 decades. And it's not, I wouldn't call my instinct or what Frankenbiting in general dishonest. We can be if we choose to be. A lot of it's just time. We have to cut it down for time, and sometimes it's just creating a better way to say something that someone took 2 minutes to say and I need them to say it in 10 seconds. You don't do that. You were like, nope, we don't do that. It felt very honest. There are very few cuts in what you did. I'm used to, if you look at a rough cut or even a fine cut of a reality show, I mean, you're going to see constant cut.
Yeah.
I did not see that with you. You let things play out honestly, so 100% honest.
Well, and that's a challenge, but that's what we look for, those moments of honesty when we're filming, to say, I need you, judge, to look this person in the eyes, judge their body language. There's no movie magic here. Just tell me if this feels sincere to you, because that's what it is. I will say this, though. Here's an interesting thing I'll throw at you. The other thing I got in trouble, well, not trouble, but there was a stupid New York Times piece. They were interviewing me and I got in trouble because I said that documentaries are not the literal truth. They are the emotional truth. And I didn't make that up. I was actually quoting, I had listened to a podcast with a guy named Joe Berlinger, and he's a documentary filmmaker, and he's done some amazing documentaries. The first one I ever saw from him was called Paradise Lost. It was the trial of the West Memphis, the killings in West Memphis, Tennessee, and just one of the most powerful documentaries I've ever seen. Highly recommend it. It was an HBO thing. But anyway, he did for Netflix a Tony Robbins documentary, and it was a feature length, one-off, 2 hours, whatever, covering a 6-day Tony Robbins extravaganza, whatever he does, right? And he was referring to that. The movie's called I'm Not Your Guru, also a really good documentary. I'm going to ask you in a second what docs you love, but
oh gosh.
But he said, no documentary presents the literal truth. He said, a bad filmmaker misrepresents an event. Okay, so let's pause there, because that's what we're talking about. That is an absolute no-no in my world. You cannot take this out of context. You can't misrepresent. He says, and a good filmmaker accurately portrays the emotional truthfulness of what goes on in the situation. So what he's saying is, if I have 6 days of footage from Tony Robbins and I have to boil that down to 2 hours, it's not actually everything that happened. It's not the literal reality, right?
That's right.
But he's taking this piece, this piece, this piece, and putting it together. And the goal is that it accurately, truthfully represents the reality of that 6 days that you've been with Tony Robbins. And that's what I'm trying to do. I have whole lives of stories that we're telling. That's, you know, I'm not spanning years of film footage, but I'm telling these stories and I have to boil them down into the most powerful, relevant, persuasive advocacy that I can. But the fact that I'm starting from here, meaning, you know, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours and making a 20-minute video does not make it in the slightest bit any less true. But anyway, enough
so
about
why
me.
did you get in trouble? Never.
Well,
never.
because, well, first of all, they Frankenbited my shit because in the because I explained the whole thing, Joe Berlinger and Tony Robbins and everything else. But of course,
they even Frankenbite quotes.
The only thing, but it wasn't a quote. This was like a documentary they did. So I'm on film saying this. It's one of these New York Times op doc pieces. That's a whole other story. I'm gonna have to do a podcast on that just separately.
I know that story.
Oh, you do know that story. Okay. But the point is, I said all that stuff I said to you about Joe Berlinger and 6 days of Tony Robbins boiled down to one. But of course, the only quote that goes in there is, these aren't the literal truth.
There you go.
They're the emotional truth. And that doesn't play right at all for the audience that I'm trying to reach, because they're, especially the ones that are skeptical to begin with.
And it's really hard in the edit. It's, you know, it does apply to my world too. There's lots of stuff that I worked on. Even your Bravo shows, there are moments where things do get emotional, right? But there are other shows I work on. A lot of food shows tend to have more emotion if you're documenting, you know, someone's story. But that's the hardest part, right? When you're in the edit bay and you have all this really, really great stuff. And so again, Frankenbiting isn't about just being manipulative and, you know, messing with someone. It's just, even to tell a compelling, honest, true story, we still have to, right? I think the only difference is what you're saying is that you didn't sign off on, you know, them portraying you that way, right? In my world, they do.
Yeah, I didn't.
It's subjective. It's a lot of it is up to us as producers and editors in the bay, how we want to do it. But we do like to stick to the truth as much as possible. We just have to work within, you know, we're documenting sometimes multiple lives and their families, and, you know, how do you truncate that down to 44 minutes an episode?
Yes.
You have to
truth
use
is such
tools.
truth is such a weird word. I mean,
I don't know anybody watches reality TV looking for that, right?
Well, guess what? I don't know anybody that watches court TV looking for that either. Because I'm sorry, but you watch these trials, it's a battle of stories. Each side has the story that they're trying to convince the jury is the truest version of the facts that are at their disposal. So it's an editing process in and of itself, because you're aligning these facts in a way and telling a story. Well, guess what? Somebody's truth is not the truth, because you can't have murdered Nicole and not murdered Nicole. You know, it's, what is it? This, nobody gives a fuck about truth. I believe that in sentencing, the prosecutor has a fiction concocted in every case, in my humble, biased opinion, which is, this person's horrible. This person is nothing more than the offense that they have committed. That's their truth. And that's never the truth. It's never the truth. That's just not how life works. And my job is to say, okay, is there a deeper truth here? Do you want to know more about this person's existence, their life, how they arrived in this moment of time, what they've done to make up for it? Like, or do you just want to accept that bullshit story? And a lot of times judges do want to accept that story because it's easier for them because they don't want to struggle through the truth of the complexities of human nature and then say, well, if I cut this person a break, then I'm going to have to cut everyone. You know, there's so many layers to this concept of truth in the life we live now, especially with fake news and everything else. But it's not a new thing, Debbie. I mean, and it's not a thing that's limited to Hollywood or reality TV or any of it, you know. I guess the truest reality TV's got to be the like American Idol shows or whatever, because you can either carry a tune or you.
That's right.
That's the truthiest truth.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to my original question. What when you watch a reality show, and I ask people this who don't work in the industry, when you say it's not real or it's fake, what is it that you think is fake? Do you think they're acting a part? It's I had one person say, you know, like they're always having dinner out, like they're always like that doesn't really, and I'm like, well, yeah, those things we set up, right? I mean, we have to book locations. There's all these, you know, nuances and things like that. So yes, is that fake? We can't just like roll cameras and cross our fingers that they do something interesting that day, right? I mean, we do have to kind of herd the group a little bit, right? And say, okay, you're going to go have dinner here and then you're going to go to a party there, kind of thing. And we ask them, you know, what's going on in your lives and things like that. But the reality is, in a short span of time, in a couple months in our lives, how much exciting stuff are you doing, right? So we create places, and we have to, there's a lot of legalities that go into, you know, securing locations and leases and all that stuff. So we come up with the places, and then while they're there, you know, we might encourage them to talk about certain things and we might not. No show has enough money to just roll cameras all day and hope something happens. Not even your nature shows, I promise you. I was on a ship. We sailed to the North Pole to potentially develop a show. I was essentially sent to Svalbard to get on a ship from this little island north of Oslo and to get on this kind of working scientist ship to see if there was a show there. It's amazing experience.
How cool is that?
It was super, super cool. But, you know, I was talking to the captain, and here you have, you know, what you would imagine would be not, you know, reality TV. It would be an animal show. It would be about scientists and things like that. And the captain of the ship said that he filmed something years ago, and the camera operator, the producers, wanted to see polar bears. I mean, that's why you sail up to the North Pole, is to see wildlife and polar bears and seals. And he said that the camera operators were throwing, you know, like chucking meat over the ship and like to attract the polar bears, because they're out there. They didn't get any shots of polar bears. And they couldn't go home without them. And so, you know, even your most kind of, you know, nature animals, things like that. I mean, you just sometimes have to move things along. I'll put it that way.
Oh, right? Do I have a great example of that for you?
Okay.
There's an old Disney nature film, 1958, and it's part of a series called True. There we go. That word again. True Life Adventures. And this episode was called White Wilderness, and it's the one about the lemmings running off the cliff. You've heard that whole thing about how lemmings follow the leader, and if the leader's running off the cliff, all the lemmings will follow them and basically commit mass suicide. And that was the thing in this movie, the lemmings running off the cliff, and that's become a sort of an old saying. Like, that's embedded in the cultural, lexicon of our society. And like, we call people lemmings because they're going to run off a cliff with the first guy, and what I found out in my research, they staged the whole thing. Lemmings don't do that.
No.
They don't do it. They had elaborate setups with these rotating platforms under the snow, and they did it, and that was all faked. And that myth has been embedded in the consciousness of life over time. But that's supposed to be a that's not even reality TV. That's supposed to be like a documentary, and a nature documentary.
And what year was that? How long ago?
1958.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's called White Wilderness, and that's where the myth is propagated. But so it's so interesting, because that's not even reality TV. That's supposed to be a documentary and a nation. That's supposed to be true. And here you got the dudes in Antarctica throwing meat off the boat, and so
I'm just yes, and I I didn't have that experience. The captain of the ship, I believe him, had that experience. But again, I know that, no, there isn't a budget for crews to just set up a camera, roll for days, weeks, months on end, and not capture anything. Those things are done.
Nature stuff.
What's that?
That's especially hard with the nature stuff.
And I don't know that it's dishonest if the whole point was to capture video of a polar bear.
Right.
It's honest.
It would have been dishonest to have people dress up in polar bear costumes and dance around the deck of the ship.
Exactly.
But yeah, the polar bears were there. They just need to be coaxed out. Now the lemming thing, that's pretty bad.
That's horrible.
That's pretty bad. All right. So this is so much fun. I think we could go on and on and on about this. I think we had a great theme that came out, which is what is truth. Before we go, though, I want to know, because you said you watch reality TV, and that's interesting to me, because you've worked for so long in reality TV that you actually watch that for pleasure still too, or is it professional development?
No, it's not professional development.
What are your shows then?
For reality? Oh gosh. Really exposing myself here. I do like the Housewives franchises. I do watch all of those. I produced a lot of Bravo shows, so I tend to gravitate towards that in terms of shows.
Yeah.
I love, what I love? I love the 90 Day Fiance franchise. I think that was a really, really smart idea. There are good sides and bad sides to these. And again, I watch it very differently. I don't watch it like the average person. I think what's happened is, I think people now, when they sign up for a reality show, they feel like they have to really bring it, right? And so sometimes there's some unbelievable, in my opinion, conversations, reactions. And that's not, I don't know if the producers are asking them to act that way. I do think the talent is pretty savvy, and they know that, a lot of times it's the dramatic cast members that one, get asked to come back for more seasons, get spinoffs, get brand deals. There's money to be made in being over the top. It's just they're not actors, and sometimes it can come across as not real. And so that might be some of what people are feeling when they're watching these things. So there's just, it's so layered, and it's really show dependent too.
Yeah.
And I honestly, I love old school Jersey Shore.
Yeah.
They have a new, not new, but they're all grown up now with kids.
Oh, interesting.
And it's called Jersey Shore Family Vacation. And
they let Snooki have kids. They let her reproduce.
She seems like a great mom. She actually misses a lot of the group outings because she's with her kids. Yeah.
Okay.
They grew up.
Well, listen, I want to make sure I am not knocking reality TV, because when reality TV really came onto the scene, I was all in. Like the Real World is the one that I remember.
Oh yeah,
that was the first.
That was groundbreaking. Mm-hmm.
It's right there in the title, Real. And I watched that for many, many seasons. I watched Survivor for many, many seasons. I hate to say this, and I, thankfully no one's listening, because I'll deny it till the day I die. But I watched The Apprentice for several seasons, and some of the celebrities
with Trump or
Yeah.
Who
And
was the other
I don't
host?
even know who.
Forget.
I don't even know. I watched the ones with Trump and I watched Celebrity Apprentice. I loved Idol I mean, I
Mm.
was all in for Idol for several years. Survivor, I said. I already told you the Real Housewives of OC. Major Queer Eye for the straight guy
Oh,
fan.
that is
Major,
okay.
not the reboot. Not the
Oh
reboot. The
no,
old school. Nah, I couldn't get in the reboot.
that is that I love. That really, it's those. I mean, what? I'm sorry you couldn't get into the reboot. It's equally amazing, but what compelling. It's just the most compelling television. I mean, I cry every single episode. It's
Yes.
really
And that felt real.
lovely.
That felt genuine when I cried in
It
that
is.
show because of whatever was happening with this person. Like I don't know if it was real, but it sure as hell felt like the emotional truth.
Yes. Okay. We should end it there, but one
I know
thing that
because it's after 5 and I legitimately could be drinking right now. I'm not
there's
still
a
dad, mom,
you're-
dad. I'm not drinking. Go ahead. Sorry.
there's an amazing show, Inside the World's Toughest Prisons.
Oh God. I couldn't
you
watch
seen it?
that. It would be so hard for me to watch that.
It's nothing. I love true crime. I love prison shows. I love all of that. And it's weird because it's been on for many seasons, and I should have clicked on it. Maybe it was the thumbnail. We talked about that.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't what I thought it was going to be, and it is compelling. It's like nothing you've ever seen before.
I know that MSNBC, before they got really like totally all in with their evening lineup, used to run these prison shows after and they were so disturbing to me. It's like, that's my job. I feel so bad for so many of my clients that are in those situations. And but I will say this, one of my all-time favorite scripted shows was Oz on HBO.
Oh, for sure. I loved Oz.
Absolutely.
That was
amazing.
Incredible. What are you watching now? What are some of your big ones now?
Well, I'm watching the morning show on Apple TV, which I think is really good.
It is good.
Just started this Netflix show, The Fall of the House of Usher, I think it's called. It's really wild and really interesting and cool and unique and different and dark and just fresh. I have so many shows. I'm torturing myself by finishing Billions because I've invested years now in that show, and I think the show jumped the shark last year, but this is it. This is the end of it, and I am so interested in beginnings and endings. And I cannot, if I get that far down the road in a show, I have to see how it ends and see if they can, even though they've stumbled along the way, can they land this plane in a way that feels right and satisfying. And let me ask you, this is the last question I'm going to ask you, and then we're going to wrap this up. But you're a story professional. My goal is to learn from story professionals what is the essence of story, and like what is, if you had a person who was a fledgling storyteller and didn't know about what makes a story good and real and compelling and meaningful and relevant and timeless, like what would your advice be about to a storyteller?
Ask a lot of questions. When I started my career very, very early on, one of my friends was a producer, and I was asking, how can I want to get up to where you are. I want to produce. I want to interview people. I want to be a storyteller, basically. And I remember him saying this vividly. He said, you have to be genuinely interested in people and their stories. And the only way to get that is to ask questions, to if you really care about someone and their story, you're going to ask lots of questions. And it always stuck with me. And I find myself being interested in people's stories off camera constantly. I'm asking a million questions. Half the time I'm apologizing at dinners, at whatever. Like, I genuinely am interested in people. And so I think for anybody that wants to tell a true story, a real story about a real person, my advice would be, one, you have to genuinely be interested in that other person. And two, ask lots and lots of questions. That would be my advice.
Wow. I hope people listen to this podcast all the way through, because that's probably the most important part of our whole discussion, especially for lawyers, because we're not good at that. We want to tell you.
Mhm.
We want to tell you. We don't want to ask. We don't want to ask those questions a lot of the time. We may want to do it about the crime, like, where were you on such and such a date, or what did the police officer say to you, or were you in handcuffs? Those are the questions we ask, but we don't ask questions about their story in that way. We have to be more curious as lawyers.
I think that's what it is being more curious, and practice with friends, practice with family, just asking questions. I think too, I don't, not in your industry necessarily, maybe so. I think people like to talk about themselves a lot, and it's hard to tell someone's story if you've done most of the talking.
Wow. Thank you so much, Debbie. This was amazing conversation. And I didn't know how it was going to go, but I just loved this conversation. I think it's jam-packed. So I hope that
I always love talking to you. And I hope that, I really hope to continue working with you. I want to tell real stories. I want to sit in the emotion of stories. I don't want to have to chop things up for timing and pace.
Yes.
I want to let things breathe. But what's great, I mean, maybe bad for us, good for the lawyers, is that, reality TV, we learn many trades. We're Jacks and Janes of many trades, meaning, budgets are low. So, most producers can also direct, can also sit in the edit bay and supervise cuts, can also do pre-production. A lot like television, scripted, film, things like that. They tend to wear one hat for the most part.
Yeah.
Reality TV producers like myself, we are in the trenches. We do it all. So if you want someone that's a real powerhouse, I recommend seeking some of my friends out.
Perfect. Good advice. Good advice. Thank you so much for doing this. That's it for today. But before we go, I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you to you, the listener, for spending time with us today, getting set for sentencing. Whether you're a lawyer, someone who could use the help, or maybe you're just a true crime buff who loves the inside scoop on how this whole thing works, I am so glad you're here, and I hope you keep listening. If you're interested in knowing more about what I do, mitigation videos, case consults, live teaching, on-demand educational content, books, articles, all of it, please visit www.dougpassonlaw.com. I'm Doug Passon. Until next time, hang in there. Wait a minute, that's a stupid way to sign off on a podcast about sentencing. Hang in there. What's the matter with you, man? I guess they call that gallows humor. Sorry. All right. Well, I will see you next time on Set for Sentencing. Bye-bye.